Well, thank you, and thank you for that introduction. I'd like to first start by thanking the sponsors and hosts of this event, and thank you all for being here and allowing me to speak to you today. I'm not a forecaster. I focus on public policy, so you can ask me what the price of oil is going to look like in 6 months or a year or 10 years from now, and I will give you the standard economist answer that it depends. And it depends on a lot of the things that Dr. Brown touched upon. And having market analyses like that is critically important, but that's not what we do at the Heritage Foundation. Grab this guy. The Heritage Foundation is a public policy organization. We promote conservative, free market ideas based on the ideas of free enterprise, limited government, and a strong national defense. Our vision is to promote prosperity where civil societies can flourish based on these ideas of limited government and individual freedom. So we perform public policy on a wide range of issues, energy being a critical one of them, and we produce reports with policy recommendations in hopes that our government will take these ideas and turn them into legislation and hopefully turn them into law. Now, we're not lobbyists. We can't specifically say vote for a specific bill or vote against a specific bill, but we can say we should lift the ban on crude oil exports and have a member of Congress introduce legislation that removes the ban on crude oil exports. And so that's where our focus lies, and I cover a broad range of energy issues, energy supply side issues, environmental regulations, energy subsidies, those types of issues. Broadly speaking, we want to see a free market energy economy. And by that I mean an energy economy based on really 3 pillars. Removing subsidies for all energy sources and technologies to allow the market to determine what technology or what energy source provides us with the most economically competitive, affordable energy. And we think that these energy subsidies do a lot more harm to the markets by distorting them than good. A project that receives government backing will often siphon private sector resources to that project, and we've seen that a lot in the United States over the past few years. Dating back to some of the energy bills all the way back to the 70s, but also more recently in 2005 and 2007, and then also a lot of subsidies in a bill in 2009. And when I say subsidy, I use the word broadly, meaning any policy that favors the production of consumption of one energy source or technology over another. So it could be direct grants, it could be targeted tax credits, it could be government-backed loans or loan guarantees, or it could be production mandates like the biofuels mandate that we have, or limits on access to domestic and international markets, such as the crude oil export ban. And that gets to our second pillar, is we want open access. We want access to our abundant resources that we have in the United States. We want access to international markets so we can sell our LNG and trade energy freely, and I'll discuss that much more. And we want to reduce the regulatory burden, not to a point where it's, companies polluting, not by any means. Companies should have to pay for what they emit into the atmosphere, but what we've seen in the United States is increasingly stringent environmental regulations that have diminishing marginal returns when it comes to their environmental benefits, almost to a vanishing point. And a free market energy economy has environmental benefits as well. It's the countries that are richer, it's the countries that are freer who are best equipped to handle their environmental challenges. And we often talk about environmental challenges and dealing with the environment as a luxury good. And it's those countries who are freer and who are more developed economically who are able to tackle their environmental challenges in a way that not only allows the economy to produce, but keeps the air clean and the drinking water clean. And this gets to a point about private property and policies that emanate from liberty. One of the reasons we've seen the shale oil and gas revolution take off in the United States is because of this idea of private property rights and access to resources, because a lot of the shale resources are on private and state-owned lands where individuals own the subsurface mineral rights. And this has been critical in this explosive growth in shale oil and shale gas across the United States. It's allowed for quick production, but also an effective regulatory environment where those state and local governments make sure that these companies aren't polluting in their own backyard. So we've seen that economic growth and environmental protection are not mutually exclusive ideas. I think the United States, through its track record on hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling, has really shown that this can be done in a way that does protect the environment. Now, we talk a lot about energy independence, and one of the questions I get a lot as a policy analyst is, when is the U.S. going to be energy independent? When is it going to be North American energy independence? And every United States president, I think dating back to the 1960s, has predicted that the U.S. would be energy independent by a certain year. And all of them have failed miserably in that prediction, which is, again, one of the reasons why I don't make such predictions. And I would submit that energy self-sufficiency or energy independence shouldn't be the policy goal for the United States, or really for any country. It should be to create access to open markets that gives energy choices to businesses and consumers. We're still going to be importing energy for a long time. We're still going to be importing oil for a long time. We may be a net exporter, we may be a net importer at some points moving forward, but that's not going to insulate us from price volatility if we have supply disruptions in other parts of the world. Again, any more than a food shock somewhere else will cause our food prices to rise. So I don't think it's necessarily the goal or policy objective to eliminate all foreign imports of oil. It's to have this open market where you have competition and choice. And this gets to a big part of the discussion, the policy discussion that's happening in Washington, D.C. right now, where my organization is located, and the debates that are going on Capitol Hill in the United States. Because of this massive increase in energy production with natural gas, with crude oil, policymakers are taking a look at these antiquated laws and regulations that we have on the books when it comes to freely trading energy. And unfortunately, the United States doesn't treat energy like every other good or service that we trade regularly around the world. And we know, Economics 101, there are tremendous, tremendous benefits to free trade, and energy is no exception. This gets to the point of giving us more choice at competitive prices. And a big part of this challenge is going to be lifting the ban on crude oil exports. And also, I would submit, expediting the process that's determined to permit liquefied natural gas terminals in the United States, which is another onerously burdensome process. But at least with that process, it's going to take a long time for the United States to actually build these LNG export terminals. So it's not necessarily the government slowing down LNG as much as it is opportunities for crude oil exports. And what we've seen in the United States when it comes to crude oil production is that some of these companies are actually shutting in production because the market has been so saturated and they have nowhere else to put their oil, to put it that bluntly. And the United States has tremendously reduced its imports of the light sweet crude oil that we were getting from East Africa, and we're trying to refine as much as possible in the United States and set up some of these little teapot refiners so we can get around the ban. But before this shale revolution took place, our refiners in the United States made these huge, huge investments, over $100 billion to refine this heavy crude oil from places like Venezuela and some from places like Canada and some from the Middle East as well. And this was before we had this huge glut of light shale oil. So our refining capacity is set up to handle this heavy oil when we're producing a lot of this light sweet crude oil. That could be easily shipped to other markets. And as I said, some companies are getting around this ban, but a more efficient process would be to remove the ban altogether. And there's a lot of members of Congress on both the Democrat side and the Republican side who are interested in pursuing this. I don't know what the president would do if that bill reached his desk, but I think a lot of it is going to be based on messaging, because right now, when it comes to lifting the ban on crude oil exports, it's a messaging war. And I think part of it is a concern that if we lift the ban and prices increase for a reason that's not a result of lifting the ban, because most economic analyses have shown that lifting the ban would actually lower gasoline prices in the United States by creating more efficient markets in the refining infrastructure. That's a hard sell for politicians. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you're exporting something that the price would actually go down. And so part of it is going to be for policymakers and organizations like mine to help members of Congress and help the general public understand that, hey, this really shouldn't be about price, even though the price would likely drop. This is about creating more economic opportunity, not just in the United States, but also for industries abroad. So again, we're for lifting the ban on crude oil exports. We're actually for getting rid of a large part of the permitting process when it comes to liquefied natural gas permits. There's an unnecessary step in which the Department of Energy has to make a determination if the country does not have a free trade agreement with the United States. Again, we think that energy should be treated like any other good or service that we trade regularly, and we should remove all of these restrictions. And I think this point is not talked about nearly enough, are the geopolitical benefits with exporting energy. In the United States, as a result of the Arab oil embargo and as a result of just generally high prices, there's been this notion that we need to keep our energy here, again, for this idea of self-sufficiency. But what we've seen is that opening markets is the best way to reduce any one nation or hostile regime's ability to use energy as a political or economic weapon. And that really came to light with the Russia-Crimea situation, is that a lot of folks realize that Russia really has a stranglehold on the natural gas market. And you can talk about economic sanctions and having things of that nature. You can talk about trying to get cars to run on electricity or biofuels for that matter, but the best way to eliminate any one nation's ability to use energy as a strategic commodity is to have more choices. And again, it's not just with natural gas, it's with crude oil as well. This reduces OPEC's influence on the market. This reduces Russia's influence on the market. And yes, it'll take some time, but not necessarily with crude oil, because we lift the ban today, we have the infrastructure and we have the ships ready to take that to the market if we can find the right buyers and the right refineries to sell it to. And it's not just about exporting the physical commodity itself, it's also about exporting the technologies. And this can have a profound implications on the energy markets. We talk about just the United States causing a game changer and a revolution in the energy markets as a result of this shale production. And it's largely true. I mean, you've seen dramatic increases. You've seen the U.S. oil and gas industry, from 2007 to 2012 grow by 40%, while the rest of the U.S. economy grew by 1%. Those are tremendous gains, had huge influences on international markets. If you look at all of the shale resources that are available around the world, as Dr. Brown pointed out, in these emerging markets, and you really start to think about if we can start to frack these resources, if we can start to develop in places like China, this is a real game changer. And it's not just about what's happening in the United States, but it's also what's happening in the United States in terms of developing this technology, in terms of innovating to lower costs, and we see that every single day, because another question I often get is, oh, well, at what price point is the shale resource uncompetitive? And again, Dr. Brown's slide touched upon this, but it changes all the time, because these companies are finding ways to innovate, they're finding ways to lower costs, and they've been going back to old wells where they went through the first time, and they're coming back with better technologies to get more energy the second time around. So it's always changing, and as these technologies adopt and evolve, when we freely trade them, it's going to have tremendous global implications. Now, I'll broadly touch on Keystone XL pipeline. I think I'm running out of time, so I'll be quick about it. Keystone XL is a pipeline that would bring up to 830,000 barrels of oil per day down to refineries in the United States. It's part of a larger Keystone system. And this process has already been gone through during the Bush administration, actually, and it went through a normal process. It went through the environmental review. It has to be permitted through the State Department because it crosses the U.S.-Canadian border. It's been, almost 7 years now since TransCanada first submitted its application. It was September in 2008 to build this pipeline that would carry not only the Canadian tar sands oil, but also some of the oil from North Dakota, the Bakken Formation in North Dakota, where we don't have the infrastructure necessary to get that oil, so we're doing a lot by rail when pipeline would be preferable. Now, this project has gone through multiple environmental reviews, studying everything from wetlands to soil to the Ogallala Aquifer, which has been a point of contention in the United States. Although if you Google image Ogallala Aquifer, Nebraska, and existing pipelines, you'll see that there's already a spider web of pipelines already lying over this aquifer. And I think that gets to the heart of this matter, is that this pipeline has become a huge just political issue. And in 2008, when Secretary Hillary Clinton was then the head of the State Department, she was asked about this pipeline when it wasn't a big issue, and she said, the reporter asked, "Are you going to support this pipeline?" And she said, "We are inclined to do so." And then the environmental activist base in the United States really made this their rally around issue and created huge political tension basically over a single pipeline. And again, it's gone through multiple environmental reviews. President Obama, in a speech last June, said that he would make his determination if the project was in the national interest as to whether it contributes significantly to climate change. And his own State Department concluded that it wouldn't contribute significantly to climate change because this tar sands oil is likely going to come out of the ground anyway. So it's environmentally safe. The pipeline is by far the safest method of transporting oil, both environmentally and in terms of human fatalities. And it's a jobs creator, and that's been one of the criticisms of the project from opponents too, is that it would only create a handful of permanent jobs. And as an economist, that suggests to me that it's a highly valuable project. We don't want to get rid of our mechanized farm equipment to employ a bunch of people with shovels and rakes. We want to have the highest value added when it comes to using labor, and pipelines are an effectively efficient way to transport oil. And again, why this is important is because it sets a dangerous precedent in the United States about investing in energy infrastructure. Are these the battles we're going to have over every single pipeline, whether it's crude oil, whether it's natural gas that's occurring in the United States? And if you're an investor or if you're a company and you think, this project, I submitted an environmental application in 2008. I thought I would be up and running on the first quarter of 2013. And here you are, it's 2015, and you still don't have the northern leg of the pipeline approved. That's very dangerous. And it's not necessarily something that's entirely new in the United States. There's a lot of not in my backyard issues when it comes to energy projects, when it comes to infrastructure development. We've seen this with the pipeline in Alaska. But having this dangerous precedent set moving forward, especially when we need more pipelines, when we need more infrastructure to get this shale oil from where it's being produced to where it needs to go, is critically important. And I think the 2016 presidential elections will be an interesting sign for where energy infrastructure goes. The Heritage Foundation isn't Republican and it's not Democrat. We're conservative and we're free market. But a Republican, pretty much every single presidential nominee said that on day one they're going to approve Keystone XL. Obviously, President Obama used his veto power, even though there was bipartisan support for the pipeline. But it will be interesting to see if Hillary Clinton gets the Democratic nomination, given what she said in the past about the pipeline, if she'll support it as a presidential candidate. So again, I'm happy to take, I don't know if we're doing question and answers from the audience, but I'm happy to talk to any of you after the conference or during any of the intermissions about any specific U.S. energy policies, and thank you for your time and attention today.